Your secrets, if you really look at yourself, you would be speechless. What happened to being doctors and teachers? What happened to being your brother's keeper? Nowadays.
What's up, family? This is Royal with Royal Alchemy Apothecary, and you are now tuned in to Band Clap TV.
Yo, Mr. Band Clap, get it in. Do it for the feeling, never in it for the dividends. Confidence, infinite, flow high, level 10. Lifeguard, get 'em in. Tight fraud, sleeping, need a night guard when I hit. Coming from my head, wanna see 'em dead. Many men guard with me, but I'm still ball heavy with a pen. Verses cut like a surgeon.
What's up, family? This is Royal. I am the owner of Royal Alchemy Apothecary, where we specialize in handmade metaphysical supplies made with organic ingredients and always charged with intent. So that's everything from spiritual bath soaps to crystal candles to magical oils, loose herbs, bath and body products, you name it. On the website, you can also book a spiritual consultation with me. And while you're there, don't forget to subscribe to our mailing list so that you are the first to know about all the new products that we'll be rolling out throughout the rest of 2019. All right, so the website is royal-alchemy.com. And you can also follow us on Instagram at royal_alchemy. And don't be shy to email us at royalalchemyllc@gmail.com for any questions or concerns.
All right, y'all, so we back. Welcome to another Band Clap TV podcast. Shout out to Miss Jazz Royale for that wonderful introduction video. And pretty much this is going to go out to anybody who would like to have me advertise their company or their business using my platform. I definitely don't mind doing that because I feel like the more people that know about your business, the more clientele you're going to get. And it also helps my brand as well. So anybody who have a website, who has a product that you're selling, anybody who got a service that you think would be beneficial and you pretty much got everything rolling, you just need help with promotion with a small donation, I definitely don't mind helping y'all out as far as that. So any inquiries regarding that, hit me up on my email, shopmeliamar@gmail.com, and I'll definitely respond back to you. Also, shout out to everybody who checked out my last video that I did about Yemoya. Shout out to Masterly Foolish, who always uploads my videos on there. I greatly appreciate it, and I also appreciate all of the comments that was on that video as well. So with this podcast, I really didn't know what it was going to be about exactly, and to be honest with you, this is more of a rant than a podcast because I'm going to be touching on a couple things. But the main thing that I really want to talk about on this podcast, because I haven't in this type of fashion, is Oya. Now, I already did a lot of other podcasts about her, pretty much talking about her origin, what she would represent in this world, if you're talking about a 3D human representation of her energy. But with me doing some research on some other things, her energy came back to me real heavy, and I got some downloads that I would really like to share with y'all because I really feel like they're interesting, and this podcast is going to have some things that a lot of women and men will be able to take from. Now, I got to give y'all a warning, as I always do. The stuff that I'm going to be talking about in this podcast, you may not truly get the understanding of this stuff unless you're on your stage 3, which is that man or that woman who's operating on the highest version of themselves, or like the way BOA would say it, the most alpha version of yourself. So one of the downloads that I found to be very interesting about Oya is when I really started doing the research about who is Elegwa's parents. And this is actually a question that I've been asking the cosmos and doing my research on for a while now. And there's actually 3 different accounts of who a lot of the Babalawos think that Elegwa's parents may be. But with me doing further research, as well as adding my meditations and going within as well, I found out that Elegwa too is a child of Yimbo and Oduwa, because something has really been leading me to Saint Martha. And every single picture, every single representation that I see of Saint Martha, the Dominator, she always has this little black boy with her. And even when I go to the Catholicism and the Bible reference, because there's not really a whole bunch of references of Martha in the Bible, but even if you pull up a picture of the white Martha in Catholicism, she always has this little boy with her. Now, there's this really good article that I found talking about this, and I'm going to add it below. And with me learning a lot about Santeria and how we would camouflage our ancient African spirituality and synonymize our African gods and goddesses with the Catholic saints, I really started to put the pieces together when it comes to being able to distinguish the two, no matter what religion that we're talking about. So when we look at the Bible, there were 3 main women that was in the baby Jesus's life. Now, we all know the story, no matter how you want to twist it and turn it around, because we know that back in that time frame that the Bible was made, when you look up the etymology of the word virgin, it doesn't mean someone who's never had sex. Virgin back in that time just meant someone who was young, like a young woman. So if we want to stick with that narrative that there was 3 women that was watching over the baby Jesus, it was the Virgin Mary of Bethany, you had Mary Magdalene, and her sister Martha. Now, if we go with the etymology definition, that Mary of Bethany was actually just a young girl that got pregnant and had the baby Jesus at a young age, and that since she was told by the Most High that the child that she was about to have was going to be a divine child, that was going to be a Messiah child, she didn't look at that baby as a mistake. And if you want to look into it in a 2019 type of reference, there was no thoughts of aborting aborting Jesus because she was so young when she had him, because the Most High already told her that the baby that you're having is going to end up being the Messiah one day. And I would imagine that while Mary and Joseph was out working or doing whatever that they was doing away from the house, Martha and Mary Magdalene would watch over the baby Jesus, and Martha would be the one doing the chores, cleaning up the house and making sure everything is in order in that type of way. And then for the most part, Mary Magdalene would be the one taking care and playing with the baby Jesus. Now, since Jesus had a higher purpose for being on this earth, being the Messiah and all of that type of stuff, just like any light being, he knew at an early age what he needed to do, what he needed to be, and how he needed to transform to be what he needed to be. So even though he had guardians watching over him, he still had his own mind, and he was so mature at an early age to the point where it was evident that he was going to end up leaving home at an early age so he can find his path. And there's a huge chunk of the Bible that's missing, because there's only a few instances where they talk about the baby Jesus, and then the next time that we really hear a lot about Jesus is when he was a lot older. So in the stories in the Bible, it talks about how Martha had this time is of the essence superwoman type of mentality, where she was trying to be on top of everything, trying to make sure that everything was as perfect as it could be. And Mary Magdalene, on the other end, when Jesus came back on the scene, she was very eager and very inquisitive to learn and soak in all of this high level wisdom, knowledge, and information that Jesus would spread every time he would come around. And this is why when we look a lot further into a lot of the missing books in the Bible, it talks about how Mary Magdalene and Jesus was close, just like how in our ancient African spirituality, Elegua and Oshun was very close. Because if we really want to break this down and bring it back to our spirituality, the Virgin Mary in this story would be looked at as Yemoya, which is the great mother who bore the divine child. Joseph would be looked at as the Orisha Oko, aka the bearer of the divine seed. And when we talk about Mary Magdalene, she would be synonymized as Oshun, and Martha, she would be synonymized as Oya. So I kept doing my research, and I came across these Bible stories, because it's only like 2 or 3 of them that really talk about Mary Magdalene and her sister Martha. Now, most of y'all who are Christians, or even if you went to Sunday school as a kid, you remember in John chapter 11 where it talks about the story of Lazarus dying, because we all know that Lazarus was Mary Magdalene and Martha's older brother. Now, when we look at the energy of Lazarus, there's a Lua that comes in mind, and there's also a Orisha that comes in mind that can both be synonymized with each other, and the Lua is none other than Papa Legba. But when we talk about the ancient African spirituality, now Lazarus can also be synonymized with Baba Luaye, and I talked a lot about his story in the podcast that I did about be careful how you treat people, because Baba Luaye and Papa Legba are both elder men who have a lot of pull and a lot of power. Even though their outward bodies may look old and their hair may be gray and they may walk with a limp, on the inside they wield a lot of wisdom, a lot of knowledge, a lot of game, and overall a lot of divine light. And if you fuck them over, the consequences are dire, simply because it's really not even them that you have to worry about getting at you. You got to worry about the Most High getting at you, and no one wants that. So in this particular Bible story, Lazarus was pretty much on his deathbed and he ended up dying, and Mary of Bethany, which was Jesus' appointed mother, as well as Martha, sent for Jesus to come and save Lazarus from dying. Now, you remember when I did the video about how Elegua represents your inner child, and with this little bitty piece of information, this also helped me to confirm even more that Elegua does represent Jesus in Christianity, because just like what I said in that older podcast, when you ask Elegua to do something for you, in a lot of instances, it may not come when you want it, and it may not come how you want it, but not only will it always work out on time in your favor, it may work out in a way that you never even thought of, because since Elegua / Eshu / Papa Legba are over the crossroads, aka the many decisions and pathways that you can make within dealing with a certain situation, a lot of times these particular entities can see what's far down the road a lot better than you can, because in most instances we're taught to really pray when we're desperate, and in that desperate do or die type of situation, in a lot of instances we ain't even thinking straight to begin with. And when you really get with these energies, they know this, because at the end of the day, all they represent is your higher self, being that light at the end of the right tunnel to let you know what road you need to go down. So in this Bible story of John chapter 11, Jesus was actually quote unquote too late, because I think it took him 7 or 8 days. I may be wrong with the count of days, but I think it took like 7 or 8 days for Jesus to even get on that side of town to deal with that situation. And when Jesus finally came on the scene, the first one yelling and screaming about him being so late was none other than Martha, because since Martha didn't really spend that time with Jesus the same way that Mary of Bethany and Mary Magdalene did, she didn't really know what a magnitude of the spiritual enlightenment and gifts and talents that Jesus really possessed. So at this point, she started to question a lot of those things. And this is where we get verse 21, when Martha said unto Jesus, Lord, if thou hadst been here, my brother would not have died. And even in verse 23, when Jesus was like, my brother will rise again, she questioned him again on verse 24. And she was like, I know that he shall rise again at the resurrection day on the last day, meaning that she knew that he was a divine person or whatever. But like I said, she didn't really and truly understand the power and the magnitude that Jesus really had. And this is when Jesus told her on verse 25, I am the resurrection and the life. He that believeth in me, though he were dead, yet shall he live. And then it talks about how, in a way, just him seeing that with all the things that he's done around the people, all of the miracles and all of that stuff that he done, you still had doubters that was in the crowd, and you still had people that was weeping and crying and acting like everything was just all over. And this made Jesus very pained on the inside, because it's kind of like, yo, what else do I need to do to let y'all know that I'm that nigga. As soon as I came on the scene, it should have been rejoicing, happiness, complete peace. But instead, y'all still over here weeping like I'm just some regular physician or something. Like y'all niggas done seen me raise the dead, heal the sick, make the lame walk, make the blind see, and y'all think that just because I was late, it's just all over. And this is where we get to verse 39, when Jesus said, take ye away the stone. And again, Martha, the sister of him that was dead, said unto him, Lord, by this time there is a stench, for it has been 4 days that he's been dead. So yeah, it was 4 days. So when you look at this story, we can already see that in the Bible, Martha was a workaholic, even if it was to her own detriment in a way. And not only did she continually question the authority of Jesus just because he had that very innocent disposition about him, it was also hard for her to trust that the God in him will be able to accomplish such a feat. Now, we all know how this story ends. He was able to bring Lazarus back from the dead, and this is really where the Romans and the Jews got together to get ready to start the whole plan to get Jesus crucified. Now, here's also another example that proves my point, is when you go to Luke 10. Now, this is another story that a lot of us grew up hearing, and this is the famous story about when Mary Magdalene was sitting down at the foot of Jesus, listening to the wisdom and the knowledge that he was preaching in the house. And for the most part, Martha was still doing what she do, slaving around in the kitchen, running around like a chicken with her head cut off. And she starts to get mad at Mary because she feels like Mary isn't doing her share of the work because she's sitting down listening to Jesus. And this is where Jesus replies to Martha again. And he says, Martha, Martha, thou art anxious and troubled about many things, but one thing is needful, and Mary hath chosen that good part, which shall not be taken away from her. Translation, I don't know why you over here mad at your sister for coming in trying to soak up this good game that I'm trying to tell y'all, because instead of you running around focusing on every other thing but the one thing that you need to be focusing on, you could be over here just like Mary getting this game. So as you can see, even though Martha was the type to not only challenge and test the authority of a man, she was never really able to fully take control of the situation, because with Jesus being so enlightened, being so calm, and pretty much having everything under control, even if it's in his own time, after Martha would do all of that doubting and do all of that quote unquote reprimanding, the verse would end with her singing his praises. So then after this story of Martha, now we got to go to France, because just like how Lilith got her own mythology, Martha got her own mythology called the legendary Martha. And this story, it kind of dates back to right after Jesus ascended into heaven. And this mythology talks about how Martha got lost in this lake called the Black Lake. And at this Black Lake, it was known to have this really, really fierce monster looking thing. They said it was a fierce dragon that was a beast that was half fish, greater than an ox, longer than a horse, and having teeth sharp as any sword. And this beast had horns on both sides like a lion and a tail like a serpent. Also, it says that this monster had wings on and could not be beaten with stones. So the mythology talks about how Saint Martha, aka the legendary Martha, was able to use her cross in her holy water to keep the dragon from attacking, and then she used her girdle to bound the dragon until the men came to defeat it. Now, with this mythology, this is where Martha was first starting to be known as Saint Martha the Dominator. And ever since our ancient spirituality, we always looked at snakes as a form of a dragon. And this is the reason why when you see statues of the Black Saint Martha, which originated from hoodoo, which is our ancient spirituality that we practiced as black slaves in America, you always see Saint Martha the Dominator with snakes around her. But the snakes don't harm her, don't bite her or anything like that. And as you can see in some depictions of the Black Saint Martha, you can also see the little black boy playing with the snakes. And also in some pictures, you see the little black boy playing something that looks like either a horn or some type of trumpet or something like that to keep the snakes at bay. And when you look into the mythology of that version of Saint Martha, she represents a spirit that you can get in contact with if you're in an abusive relationship and you need to subdue your partner before they try to kill you or anything like that. Saint Martha the Dominator can also be used to subdue your enemies as well. And for people that are on the dark magic side of the game, you have women who do spells to Saint Martha if they want to gain a dominant upper hand in their relationship with the guy. Meaning that if a girl is in a relationship with a guy that's quote unquote a player and she wants him all to herself the same way that Oya wanted Shango all to herself once upon a time, that's why I keep telling y'all fellas, y'all better really watch out when it comes to having sex with these women and you don't really get to know them first. But see, I'm gonna talk about this later on in this podcast. So another incarnation of this Saint Martha energy goes to Haiti. When we talk about Haitian voodoo, Saint Martha there is looked at as Mami Wata, which is the celestial mother mermaid goddess, in a lot of ways synonymized with Yemoya, just in a different diaspora and in a different part of the world. And a lot of her attributes are the same. It's kind of a mixture of the Saint Martha in hoodoo and also Yemoya in Yoruba spirituality. But coming all the way back around, when we talk about the Orishas, what Orisha represents Saint Martha. Yep, you guessed it, none other than Oya. So this download really taught me a lot just about how long and through how many incarnations that this energy has been here on the earth. And I'm not even done. When we go to ancient Kemet, we got Sekhmet, and y'all can look up her mythology in your own time. And what really helped me to put these pieces together was actually a video that Nazir Ra did on his channel. So shout out to Nazir Ra. And if y'all want to look at that video, it's called How to Identify a Naga King, DNA Ascension of the Cosmic Nagas. And in that video, he kind of touched on a little bit about Hindu mythology. And this is something new to me because I don't really know too much about Hindu mythology. So this is some new stuff that I'm just learning about. But from what I researched and also the downloads that I got in my meditation, something really wanted me to focus in on Kali, Shiva, and Shakti. So when I looked into that mythology, I started to see a lot of more similarities again. Now, every time I see a deity that controls death and time, or a deity that controls life and death, or a deity that had to quote unquote sacrifice their life for a better time, aka what Jesus did on the cross, they all represent that same Elegua, innocent type of energy with them. Now, when we look at Shiva, he was revered as not only a ruler of time and death, Shiva was also known as a great ruler who essentially had 3 wives named Parvati, Shakti, and Kali. And I kind of touched on Kali a little bit when I was talking about the whole situation with Remy Ma and Foxy Brown in that podcast that I was doing about Aaliyah and Akasha. Now, what is the similarity? We have a Obanani figure, which is Parvati. We have the goddess Shakti, which represents Oshun. And even when you see the depictions of Shakti, she's always dressed in yellow, just like Oshun. Shakti represents not only the Kundalini energy that you need for your third eye, Shakti just represents that energy of innocence, vitality, joy, happiness, and pretty much everything that has to do with connecting your solar plexus to your heart chakra. And in a lot of pictures, you can see Shiva holding Shakti. Now, in this mythology, the same way as the mythology of Saint Martha, but just a little bit differently, there was said to be this huge demon that was plaguing the world, and Shakti went out to fight this demon. Now, in the story, when she charged at the demon and stabbed the demon, the blood from that demon started to fall onto earth. And when that blood fell onto the earth, it started to create legions and legions of demons on the earth. So with Shakti seeing this, she got really, really mad. And when Shakti gets really, really mad, she turns into what we know as Kali, which is that ruthless and bloodthirsty warrior aspect of herself. And when Kali turns into this form, her path of destruction knows no bounds. I mean, y'all seen the pictures of Kali. I don't really got to go in too much about her. Y'all already know who Kali is about. So with Kali's sword and extra 2 arms, because it shows that Kali has 4 arms, she was able to make quick work of not only the principal demon, but she was able to go on earth and kill all of the other demons that ended up spawning on earth because of that principal demon that came. Now, the thing about Kali is, as soon as she goes on a rampage of destruction, it's hard to keep her from going off on the deep end, because with her, it's kind of like when a shark is in the water and that shark starts to smell blood, you may not even be the one that's bleeding, but if you're just in the vicinity of some sharks that smell blood, if you don't get out the way, you'll end up getting killed too. So what happened with Kali is, she got to the point where she was just so bloodthirsty that she started to lose her mind. And when Kali isn't in her right frame of mind, it's fucked up for everybody, because just like Oya, even Kali's victory dance is destructive. So we got to the point where she was killing so much that even though the job was done, Kali was still killing people. She was killing innocent people that had nothing to do with the situation just because they was in the vicinity of her wrath. And this is when the people really started to worry. So they went and called on Lord Shiva, because everybody in the kingdom knows that the only person who can calm Kali down when she's in that destructive state is Shiva. And we all know who Shiva represents. Now, you have some people that'll interpret that picture of Kali stepping on Shiva's chest as a symbol of female nature's domination over a man. And in a lot of ways, even in the red pill and the manosphere community, they talk about all the time how female nature is undefeated. A man can only accept female nature, and with a certain type of knowledge, you can even subdue female nature to the point where the female nature can start to work for you in a positive type of way. But you can never defeat female nature, and you'll never really control female nature. But the real reason for this picture was that once Shiva was called to the scene, he went to go assess the fatalities and the damages that Kali was doing. And since Kali was in the middle of her dance of destruction, she stepped on Shiva's chest by accident, because she didn't even see him in the way, because she got to the point where she was literally in a blind rage. But it was only when she made a mistake and stepped on Shiva's chest that she calmed down, came back to her senses, transformed back into Shakti, and felt extremely sad and embarrassed that she went so far into a blind fury that she almost killed her husband. Because at the end of the day, as dangerous and as destructive and as fierce as Kali is, the one person that she wouldn't dare hurt is her beloved Shiva. So now, what does all of this have to do with the connection between Elegua and Oya? And this is where things really started to make sense when I started to research and find that there were 3 different stories about who people thought Elegua's parents were. But the answer was pretty much the same answer that was within all of the other manifestations of Oya, and that was Elegua was born from his cosmic mother and cosmic father, which was Oduwa and Yimbo. And when he came to earth, just like Jesus, just like Shiva, he had 3 women who pretty much would keep Elegua company while he was on earth. And the thing that I really love about getting into the energy of Elegua is that with learning his mythology, I can now see why as Papa Legba, he was so powerful, because coming up in a lot of ways, just like Lazarus, Legba didn't really want for anything. He was one of those inquisitive kids that didn't really need much supervision. And since Ogun put him out the house where he had to wander in nature, he was able to learn about nature at an early age, meaning that as a kid, Elegua, who was also the child that was with Saint Martha, and man, I really wish that I could find that lecture that Bobby Hemming confirmed this, because this was something that was given to me in the download from my meditation, but I was actually able to find a Bobby Hemming lecture where he actually confirmed it. But since Elegua was outside a lot, not only did he learn how to become one with the animals, so Elegua was out there with the snakes at an early age. You can say that Elegua had 3 or 4 different upbringings, because he was pretty much passed around to all of the goddesses. That's the reason why when you look at Yoruba of mythology, every Orisha has some type of form of Elegua or Eshu that's always with them, because every time Elegua would get bored and want to find somebody to play with, he could go to the riverbank and play with Oshun, he can go to the palm trees and play with Shango, then he can go to the cave in the forest where Ogun is and play tricks on him. But see, when it came to Oya, other than with Oshun, Oya was one of the main goddesses that Elegua hung around. Now, when I went into my meditation and I was really asking those questions about Oya and Elegua, the first thing that came up was, "You're not my mom," which means that when Oya would see Elegua, just like Martha and Jesus, Oya didn't see Elegua as a divine Orisha, because y'all gotta remember, Oya tried to have 9 kids, but they all resulted in a stillbirth. So in a lot of cases, not only would Oya treat Elegua like her own son, she would also treat Oshun's Ibeji twins like her own children, if Yemoya was too busy to watch over them while Oshun was working. Because when we look at the relationship between Oya and Ogun, there wasn't that innocence type of aspect that Oya just had around her like that. She couldn't feel that on Ogun, because for the most part, Ogun was ice cold. I mean, y'all already remember what I talked about in my last podcast about all the stuff that he did to Yemoya. So Ogun, he really didn't know how to love like that, so he just did what he did best, which was be super dominant, have the roughest of sex, and be overly protective, aka the man of steel. And the thing about it is, when we look into Oya's mythology, because when you look at her mythology, when you look at Kali's mythology, Saint Martha's mythology, the Oya character almost have the same description, that she's complex, that she's misunderstood. In Oya's case, she went through a lot of trauma as a child, dealing with the situations that was going on with Yemoya and Obatala, and each of Oya's sister took that a different way. With Oya, she had a lot of anger, she had a lot of fire within her. She couldn't see how her mom was able to handle the abuse that she did and not fight back. And this is the reason why in the mythologies they talk about how, just like her counterparts, Oya is a very fierce goddess that has a really bad temper and a really bad mean streak. And just like Saint Martha, Oya has a lot of issues dealing with men, and there's only 2 men who Oya respects and or trusts. Number 1, Obatala, her father. She has an immense love for him, definitely upon his transformation from Oduwa to Obatala, because the Obatala archetype of a father is a lot more dominant, a lot more strict, and a lot more powerful as far as being an authority figure. And then the next person that she respects is Elegua, because again, Elegua never told a lie. And as a child, Elegua would hang around Oya a lot, especially when Oya went to fight with her violent winds and tornadoes and violent storms, because just like Kali, when Oya hits her mean streak, she can have a warrior soul and heart of a man to where she can be senselessly destructive also. And for her, it's Elegua who calms her down, because when she looks at Elegua and she sees how innocent he is and how quote-unquote meek and lowly at heart he is, she starts to calm down, because in him she starts to see all of the other innocent people who could die due to this violent storm that Oya is causing. Now, the one thing that Oya never truly liked about Elegua is the fact that even though she loved him like her own son, since Oya is the goddess of Scorpio, and I'm gonna break that down a little bit too, since we're talking about love, a woman who has a Venus in Scorpio on their natal chart can be extremely sensual and extremely freaky, better yet, one of the biggest freaks. But on the flip side, a woman whose Venus is in Scorpio is all about control and domination, aka the dominatrix. And the main thing that Oya didn't like about Elegua is the fact that every time she would try to quote-unquote love him too hard and she would start to get too controlling over him, Elegua would quietly leave the scene, go back to his crossroad where he done made friends with the mice and the snakes and all the other wildlife, and pretty much he'll be straight. And that's the one thing that Oya could never really understand. Why is it that these dangerous animals and these dangerous environments that to any mortal man, to any mortal woman, do go out there and they would kill you? Them animals will bite you, those snakes will bite you and kill you. So she was always worried about Elegua. But since Elegua was working in his divine innocence, he had heavenly and cosmic protection. So Elegua never got hurt when he was at the crossroad. Now, one thing that I really wanted to touch on with saying all of this is that our ancient spirituality is so vast and it's so large, and even though I break these concepts and I break these gods and goddesses down in a 3D type of aspect where you can kind of see it in your life, these stories are way deeper and way more metaphysical than what I could even break down, because I'm still learning this stuff. Like I always say, I ain't shit. I'm just a student just like y'all, and whatever I learn, I'm willing to talk about it with y'all, but I am no expert on anything, and I'm still learning just like y'all. Now, this part of the podcast, just like I did about Yemoya, I want to for a moment talk about Oya a little bit deeper, because I talked about Oya in terms of how she represents the quote-unquote boss chick, because that's one thing that she wanted me to clarify. It's not necessarily the bad chick. The proper definition is called the boss chick. Now, when I say the word boss chick, I don't mean necessarily a woman that got a bougie attitude. She has this persona that she's just the shit and can't nobody tell her nothing, because a lot of those women who have that fake quote-unquote toxic masculinity attitude, a lot of them, I'm not gonna say all, but a lot of them be faking a funk. It's just a facade. But no, what I'm talking about is a woman who's at stage 2, meaning that she have a lot to bring to the table as far as career-wise, as far as financially, aka if you have a CEO type of mindset, Oya will be a great asset to whatever company that you got going on, because not only are Scorpios on top of their business, when it comes to finances, they're about their business. When you have someone who has Scorpio in their second house, because second house deals with material security and values, and it rules over money, personal finances, and personal possessions. So with someone that has Scorpio Scorpio in their second house, they're going to have intense feelings about money. They're going to be very passionate about it, to the point where they're almost going to be super secretive about it, because they don't want everybody to know the type of money they got, because they want to make sure that they're secure in the money that they have. And when I tell y'all, when it comes to Oya and the energy of Scorpio, I can talk about this in many ways, simply because I've had so many aspects of Oya in my own life, even dealing with my own mom, because my mom is a Scorpio. And like I always said, my mom was a very protective mom, and a lot of her protection was spiritual, because my mom was so spiritually inclined to the point where she was able to see visions and have premonitions of bad things that's going to happen in my life before they happen, and she would either warn me about it and or protect me from it, even in situations where I didn't truly understand why my mom was so on 10 about different things until after the fact. Because remember what I told y'all, Oya, she gets her praise after the fact, after the storm, after everything has been cleared out and you're in that rebuilding process, and you see how her removing all of those things in your life so you can transform. And speaking of transformation, when we're talking about Oya's energy, no matter what avatar you choose to look at her in, every single one of her avatars in every single spiritual system that she's in has to do with some form of transformation. Because remember, Oya is the goddess of change. Just like in that podcast where I was talking about the bad chick archetype of Oya, even though this example is on a lower level, it still makes sense, because if you were a type of guy that came up not believing in female nature, thinking that all women were a certain way, and then you meet a Oya and she puts that storm into your life, whatever that is for you, I would think that after that experience, you would be transformed into a more wise and knowledgeable man. But I don't want to rehash that, because when I was able to really get into the energy that Oya has now, even she has transformed. And the best way to really describe Oya's energy is kind of like that real sexy auntie if she's single and she got that Nana Baroko spirit on her. Because remember, Oya, she ended up taking a lot more after her grandmother than she really did with Yemoya, because in a lot of ways, Oya liked that fierce side of Yembo before she split in two and became Yemoya and Nana Baroko. So translation, you got this real sexy auntie, or you know this woman who's an auntie that's real sexy, and she's single because she feels like that can't no man, quote unquote, handle her. And on the other side of the game, if she is married and have a husband, I would say damn near 10 times out of 10, he used to be a player slash pimp back in the day, and he's been working with her for many years. So the result that you see is because of that work that he put in all the way back then. So she's one of those type of women where you would wonder why, and you would wonder how her husband is even able to put up with her. But what y'all don't realize is she truly is a lady in the street and a freak in the bed, and her quote unquote form of love isn't super gushy and mushy and nurturing like Yemoya's is. If she has kids, she would be one of those aunties that's damn near scared for their kids to go outside in fear of them getting into something that's gonna eventually kill them. If her son or if her daughter's teacher say something negative about one of her kids and she find out, she'll be more on 10 than the dad is, to the point where the dad gotta calm her down. And I can't lie, I dealt with this in my own life, because that whole story about Kevin Hart and what his mama told him to tell his teacher when he got back to school, that's literally what my mom used to do when I was in school. The only difference was my mom would write a quote unquote hot note. That's what she would call it. She would write a hot note to the teacher and tell the teacher to stop picking on me. Now, this is the thing. If I lied to my mom, meaning that if I really was cutting up in class, and then the teacher sent a note to my mom, and then my mom reacted the way a Oya would react, and then it comes back on her because I lied, woo, those used to be some of the most painful ass whoopings. Because see, my dad, he was real strict. He was very strict. But it was just something about my mom. When she would get real mad and I did something that I wasn't supposed to do, and my mama gotta whoop me, my dad, he would get out the way, because he like, look, I don't want no parts of that. Whatever going on is between you and your mother. And while I'm crying and getting spanked, my dad will be somewhere in the room watching the game or something, somewhere with the door closed. So a lot of Scorpio parents can be very overprotective in a good and sometimes in a bad way, because since my dad was a Gemini like me, my dad understood that even though my mom did protect me from a lot of things that could have landed me in some major trouble, my dad knew at the end of the day, she can't save me and protect me from everything. Sometimes I needed to bump my head, and sometimes I needed to go through certain things just so I can know not to ever do it again. Now, with Oya being in this energy now, I like to call it Aunt Yansa, because if y'all don't know, Yansa is actually Oya's last name. She's a whole lot more calmed down, meaning that in her state that she's in now versus when she was a lot younger, it takes a whole lot to get her mad. Now, once she gets mad and once that mean streak starts to rise and starts to take over, it's still murder she wrote, don't get it twisted. But that short fuse that she used to have, it's a lot longer now. So one of the main things that she really wanted to, I guess, talk about is her relationship with Shango, because we all know that Oya was Shango's first lover slash girlfriend. Now, her thing was, with a lot of Oyas, they are obsessed with creation and they're also obsessed with death, because both of these aspects require some type of transformation. And those are the three things that not only Oya values. When you really pay close attention to a lot of Scorpios in their own special way, they love dealing with some type of aspect of creation. Now, in this 3D super low level dense world that we live in, especially with this system of soulless beings that take all of our ancient metaphysical divine science and created a system to use a lot of that stuff against us, we synonymize the highest form of creation with the lowest level of communication, like I talked about in my last podcast. Translation: Scorpios are the freakiest fucking zodiac sign. Scorpios is one of the freakiest zodiac signs simply because of that. Because when you think about it, when you have sex and when you have a orgasm, and this this is something that I found out in doing some research and etymology of the word orgasm. The French definition of the word orgasm is called la petite mort, which means the little death, meaning that when you have an orgasm, for those few seconds that you're in that bliss and that pleasure, you actually die for a small second. Why do you think the saying goes, when a man has that orgasm from ejaculation, there's no other feeling in the world that feels better than that orgasm, aka release? It's like that heavenly feeling. And then once you have your quote unquote little death inside of the woman, just like Yemoya and just like every woman, once that woman receives your spiritual essence as well as your DNA in her, now she's gonna slowly start to transform and metamorphosize. That's why you have a lot of those couples, and if they've been in a real long-term relationship and they've been having a lot of sex, they start to look like each other damn near, because she has so much of his DNA inside of her. And then the last step is creation, because y'all create a baby. And this is one of the reasons why Scorpios are so obsessed with sex, because sex is that one thing that you can do on this earth and get all three aspects of creation, transformation, and death. And it's funny because in my life personally, I've had Scorpios all around me that were able to teach me the significance of all three. My mom, she taught me a lot about not only the spiritual world, but one of the things that she really would drill in my head when I was number one, making sure that my future is to the point where I won't need to depend on them like that. Because one thing my mom would always say, that I ain't gonna always be here to help you out, and I'm not gonna always be here for you to come back home and regroup and get yourself together. And that's one thing that she would always say. And then shout out to my homegirl Jada Artis, because she's a Scorpio as well. And Jada, she taught me a lot about transformation. When I first met Jada at Full Sail, and I used to DJ at the open mics and stuff at school, and she used to be a part of the show production crew that puts the events together, and I would hear her hum all while she was getting everything set up and breaking everything down and all of that. And I knew that she could kind of sing, but I never would have known in a million years that she had the voice on her that I found out that she ended up having. And the rest is history. Like, she's transformed to be this wonderful singer, and she's definitely going place in this industry. She's going to take this industry by storm, and I'm just glad to say that I was along for the ride. I was able to take her out of retirement and get her on stage, because I feel like that's really where she belongs. And then last but not least, on the creation side of the game, my roommate Shaq, which is a Scorpio too, is one of the dopest producers that I've ever met, really, since I've been in Florida. I mean, this nigga, and the thing about it is, he's only 20, and the beats that he makes and the music that he makes, many people have told him that he got like album quality stuff, which is amazing for how young he is, because when I was 20 years old, I was still finding myself, and I didn't really start making bangers like that, like memorable songs that I would sing over and over, until I was at least, 24, 25-ish. So the fact that he's on this journey so early and his creative genius is that good, man, he is gonna be a problem. I'm telling y'all, man, once he on the beat, that nigga gonna be a problem. I'm telling y'all heard it here first. So going back to the situation with Shango, because in the podcast that I did about Shango and his three wives, I talked about how what really made Shango stand out from Ogun was that even though Shango had a very bad temper, and he got that from his real dad, Ogunju, the volcano god, when Obatala raised him up, he gave Shango an all-white Ileke to balance him out. And that white Ileke represented purity. It represented the most innocent and the most pure of anything. And plus, Alegua and Shango was one and the same, meaning that Shango, even though he was a great king, and even though he was an alpha male, his heart and his emotions wasn't ice cold like Ogun's was. And when Oya seen that Shango had that same innocence inside of him that he remembered seeing in that baby Alegua, that was just what Shango needed to create that long-lasting imprint in Oya. And the thing about it was, even though she really did love Shango, she really didn't feel like that she had a solidified position in his life, because even though he would tell her that when it comes to the way they had sex and the way they would be intimate together, she was his favorite lover, she wouldn't really feel that, simply because she knew his nature. She knew that he was a player, and that sex wasn't really a solidified position, because she wasn't the only one that he was having sex with. And it just seemed like when it came to everything else in Shango's life, he pretty much had everything else under control, because remember, this was before Obanani came on the scene. So Shango is just this huge leader. And the thing about it was, when it came to Shango as a person, he deserved all of the honor and all of the prestige that he got, because when you really look into the mythology of Shango, he had an impeccable relationship with the Most High, aka he loved his father Obatala, and he was also the apple of Yemoya's eye, which is not really something that Oya is used to seeing in her, because remember, before Shango came on the scene, back when Orunmila was born, she was still that furious, super mad, super angry, super pained mother, because Obatala still had that rule in place to where any son that she had would be put to death. The main reason why Shango and Orunmila survived that rule was because the Most High stepped in place and told him not to do it, because those two male Orishas, aka his next two sons, were going to end up being two of the most revered rulers and enlightened men. So there was a situation that went down in the Oyo kingdom where Shango ruled, and Shango had just been victorious in battle, and he had this huge celebration going on. There was a lot of drinking going on. Shango was playing his drums all crazy, dancing around without a care in the world. All of his concubines was there, and he was entertaining them. And Oya, being the jealous girlfriend that she was, and she was like, look, I don't even want to be a part of that, because I can't stand seeing you around those other women. So I'm just wait for you to get home and we can have our own party, if you know what I mean. See, the thing about Oya is, even though she got a tomboyish way about her, when she gets into her feminine, that's when you really need to make sure as a man you definitely on your P's and Q's, because she can really put you under a spell. Can't lie. on. Now, word on the street was that unbeknownst to Shango, all of his enemies weren't defeated, meaning that some of his enemies decided to lay low and they were gonna plan a surprise attack while everybody in the castle was celebrating and thinking that the battle was over. So his enemies crowded around the castle, hid in the bushes, and waited till Shango and a couple of his concubines staggered out of the door. And it was at this point that Shango got ambushed and they knocked him out, put him in chains, and took him back to their castle as prisoner. Now, Oya being the type of person where she pretty much knew Shango like the back of her hand, so she pretty much knew if he was coming straight back home, how long it was gonna take. She pretty much knew that if he decided to fuck off with one of his concubines, what time that would be when he would get back to the house. So when time kept passing by and passing by and passing by and he never showed up, Oya started to get very, very worried because like I said, Oya had a love for Shango, even though she was considered as a mistress. So when Shango would go away to meditate, he would go off into the forest and he would have his bowl and he would have his stick that he used to crush up herbs and stuff like that. And the Most High taught Shango how to use certain herbs and certain things in the forest to make this secret concoction. And when he made this secret concoction and drank it, it gave him Ashe, meaning it gave him power. Kind of like on the Black Panther when T'Challa drank that juice from that ancient fruit and all the powers that he started to have after he drank that juice. This is the same thing that was in our ancient African spirituality with Shango. Now, the thing about it is, Shango was open with a lot of things, but when it came to this, he was extremely, extremely secretive when it came to this. When it was time for him to go to the forest, he wouldn't let nobody follow him, no matter how Oya would beg and plead and beg and plead, talking about, I know why you won't let me in the forest. I know why you won't let me follow you. Is it because you got some other bitches? I'm just playing. But nah, seriously, Oya was a very, very jealous girlfriend. So her first thought was, maybe that's where he's at. Maybe he's in that forest. So Oya went into the forest. Now, since Shango was in a rush, and also since he was going to a party, he made this really big batch of juice. And since he was in a hurry, he left it there unattended. And when Oya stumbled across it, she started to get real curious and she started to get real fascinated with this juice. Now, this was some really, really powerful juice because when she looked into that bowl and looked into that juice, she started to have a vision. She started to see Shango locked up as a prisoner in that castle where his enemies held him for captive. She was like, oh shit, I gotta do something about this. So out of anger and out of desperation, she took a little sip of the juice, and as she drank it, she started to feel this immense fire inside of her. Her eyes started to light up like light, and it got to the point where her mouth started to burn and her throat started to burn, and she ended up with this real bad pain in her mouth. And when she tried to scream out, a big ass ball of fire came out of her mouth. So it started to really scare Oya. She like, oh, I done fucked up now. What the hell is this? So with this juice and the help of Shango's Ashe, he was able to command lightning bolts, and he was able to ride on these lightning bolts as if they were horses to get to where he needs to go in a real fast pace. So now that she's drunk some of the juice, now she got the same type of power that Shango has. So she commanded a lightning bolt the same way that she's seen Shango do it, and she went to the castle where Shango was at. So at this point, Shango done came to, but he's weak because he don't have his juice, and plus he's been drinking and all of that type of stuff, so he really don't have the strength like that to break out of the chains. And this is the part of the Pataki when it talks about how Oya got so mad and so furious that she literally grew a beard and tried to turn herself as much into a man that she could so that she could wield Shango's power to go and save him. So when she finally came on the scene to break him out, and the first thing that Shango noticed was that her eyes were filled with light just like the way his was, and every time she tried to talk to him, fireballs would come out of her mouth just like Shango. And even though he was glad that his girlfriend was coming to aid him, he was still pissed off that she got in his stuff. But Oya was like, look, either I went and drunk this juice so I can get the power to bail your ass out, or you just would have been shit out of luck. But hey, on the flip side, now I'm a lot more valuable to you than those concubines that you be sleeping with, because now you got a right-hand woman on the battlefield who's just as powerful as you, and we could conquer together as wind and lightning and fire. And the thing about it was, when it comes to that aspect, there's no better team than Oya and Shango. But like I said, Oya loved Shango, and the Scorpio's love is all about domination and control. So now Oya felt that since she has this really high position in Shango's life, because being a warrior was one of the greatest things that she loved about him, she thought that surely she should be fit to be his queen. And I mean, she really tried. She tried to have his children, but she wasn't able to have children. She couldn't really handle being at the functions with Shango, as far as with him being a musician and a drummer, simply because all the women would be on him, and she didn't really like going to those type of functions, because with Oya being the goddess of storms and having a fiery mouth, she would cause drama and she would cause a lot of destruction every time she would go. And since her form of love wasn't the same form of love that Yemoya had for Shango, that was something that he was yearning for, that he needed. And Obatala knew that even though Oya could definitely satisfy Shango sexually, Oya wasn't good enough to make Shango settle all the way down. And this is what truly bothered Oya. So when Obanani came on the scene, and it was Obatala's doing that put Obanani and Shango together, Oya really felt some type of way about that, because in her mind, she already viewed Obanani as somebody way more powerful than her. Shoot, Obanani was the one that taught Oya how to fight. So in Oya's mind, she really felt like she was truly about to lose Shango totally, because she was like, shit, he don't even need me to fight with him no more, because he got Obanani. He don't even need me for no bomb sex or anything like that, because Obanani was such a seductress. She taught Oshun a lot of stuff. Plus, Obanani was a master magician. So pretty much everything that Oya felt like was finally able to bring to the table, Oya thought she finally had a solidified position in Shango's life, and this Obanani is about to come and take all of that away. And she was like, look, I love my sister, I really do, but damn, you had so many other people that you could have picked to be your king. Why did it have to be Shango? Like, why did it have to be him? That was her train of thought. And it's one thing about a Scorpio, when they have that pent up anger, that pent up resentment, that pent up hurt, that's when the craziest of drama starts to ensue with them. But getting into her energy and talking to her now, that's the one thing that she truly regretted about that relationship, because unbeknownst to Oya, Shango still needed her to be that right-hand woman out there on the battlefield, simply because Obanani, she had a totally different job in Shango's life. Obanani was the queen. She was the mother. She was the educator that was supposed to stay at the castle and educate the children and teach the soldiers how to fight and all of that kind of stuff. So she didn't have time to be out in the field, to be out on the battlefield with Shango like Oya. So little did she know, she did have a solidified position in Shango's life, but she was so blind to the point that she wanted full control over him totally, and she couldn't even live up to every single expectation that he would need, except for one or two areas. And when she ended up breaking up him and Obanani, that's when she truly saw that, because indeed Shango was never fully the same after that. No matter what Oya tried to do to cheer him up, he was never the same. And that's a testament to ladies in general. If y'all see that y'all got a dude and there's certain critical areas in his life that you do really, really good helping him on, but there's other areas that he may need that you, being the limited person that you are, you may not be able to satisfy every single area. But one thing she pointed out was, instead of you trying to be Superwoman so you can try to fully lock him down, because the thing about it is, not every guy is going to be honest about that situation. So instead of that woman trying to be Superwoman, if she can just provide him the very best with the areas that she knows that she can be proficient in his life in his eyes, you will always be looked at as an expert in that area. Meaning that, say if you're a woman and you got this guy and you know how to cook his favorite food, and you can cook his favorite food damn near the same way his mama know how to cook it. As long as you know that you're the best at that position, it don't matter who else he will go to. He's gonna always come back to you to get that food, because that position in his life, you solidified that position. Now, just like in that podcast that I said about Yemoya, you can't own a woman and a woman can't own a man. And when it comes to situations like that, you can't control nobody, because even if you could, since we're human, things still may not go the way you would want it to go, even if you did have control. Because I see situations to where you have these career-oriented women and they get with one of these low-level, dusty type of dudes, and they may be able to put it down, but other than that, they broke, they ain't got nothing going on for themselves, staying with you, and you think it's cool simply because you can control that situation, or at least you think you can. And since you got that Oya inside of you, being that goddess of change, you think that you can change that guy to be the type of guy that you would want him to be. But that almost never works out. And the thing about it is, if he does end up changing, a lot of women don't even respect that guy anymore, because at the end of the day, it was who he was, whoever that was, that made you attracted to him in the first place. So talking about Shango and his 3 wives, Shiva and his 3 wives, Jesus and the 3 mothers, there's one thing in common with this, and that is polygamy. Now, when we're talking about the alpha sphere and the manosphere and all of these different spheres, polygamy has been a very, very big subject now, aka the taking on of multiple wives. And the thing about it is, in every spiritual system that I go into, there's always some type of polygamy aspect. And since Oya is known as one of the ultimate businesswomen, Orishas, the way she looks at it is like this: every man is gonna need these 3 archetype of women in his life. A, the Obanani archetype, which is the housewife, the woman who takes care of the castle, makes sure all the kids are educated and fed and everything's in order in the kingdom while that man is out doing his kingly duty. Because when I'm talking about polygamy, I'm only talking about guys who are kings, rulers, or nation builders. And either you are that already, or you got a strong mindset of one of those 3 archetypes, because you have a lot of these low-level dudes calling themselves doing polygamy and fucking up the name of it. And that's the reason why when you talk about this type of subject, especially with us black people, it gives us a bad taste in our mouth, because number one, this system and this world we live in is ran by the lowest level of communication, which is sex. But if you're a righteous stage 3 man and you're trying to be in a polygamous relationship, there's a lot that goes into that meets the eye. So the 3 archetypes of women that a man would need is 1, the Obanani archetype, 2, the motivator and the cheerleader. And that's what Oshun was, because remember, for a long time, Oshun was just Shango's best friend. She would be an equivalent of that girl that you got who's a friend and she's real sexy, and y'all go out to the club together and she acts like your girlfriend, and y'all go to the club and she pulling women for you. You know, Shango would play his drums and Oshun would be dancing around with her tambourine. And after a long day of work, or even if he was injured from battle or whatever, he could always go to Oshun's house and talk it over with her, everything that he was going through, and she would pretty much give him that motivation and cheer him on. And then you got archetype number 3, which is that ride or die, that woman who's out there in the field with you, out there on the battlefield with you fighting, and you ain't got to worry about her because she can hold her own, so y'all both out there kicking ass. And the thing about it is, you got so many women out here that's with these stage 3 ruler type of men, and they have this nation building mindset. And since the women would just want the guy all to themselves, they would bend over backwards and try to be every one of those 3 archetypes that he need. And since she's spreading herself so thin, she ends up being just average at all 3 of them, which is going to always leave room for, if another person comes around and they can do it a lot better than you, now that spot is up for grabs. So instead, one thing that Oya was pointing out was, at least in her case, she wished that she could have realized how much of a solidified position that she had in Shango's life. And if things would have been different human wise, he would have been able to simultaneously be with all 3 of his wives at the same exact time in a harmonious type of way. So before I let y'all go, because I know this it's a super long podcast, I kind of want to give y'all an analogy of how I would define what a healthy polygamous situation would be like, at least in terms of a stage 3 type of guy. Now, before I put this out here, I'm gonna go ahead and do my disclaimer. I don't know everything, y'all, but if I were to have my ideal situation like this is how I would run it. Because one thing that I do like about Oya, when you meet a Oya, you'll know what she sees you as, and pretty much you'll know where you stand with her right off the bat. Because like I said, there's only really 2 archetypes of men that'll even get Oya's attention. Well, really 3, because you got Ogun, which is that ice cold hearted dude like Ogun who rules with an iron fist. Now, usually on paper, these relationships are real fucked up because there's a lot of physical abuse that goes on with a lot of those relationships. So it's usually one of those situations to where they'll stay in a relationship long enough for them to either find the strength to get out or find someone new that can quote unquote save them from that situation. And then you got Shango, aka the alpha male archetype. Now, the thing about it is, with these 2 archetypes of men, yeah, you may be able to be in a relationship with an Oya, but you're really not going to be able to get everything that Oya has to offer, because even with Shango, the alpha male, he only likes certain aspects of Oya, and Oya only likes certain aspects of Shango. She likes his innocent and just heart, but it's that innocent and just heart that makes her love him, aka want to control him. And also, since Shango was scared of the dark, meaning that he was scared of the occult, which was something that Oya was very well versed in, being the fact that she has to go back and forth to the cemetery with help from her sister to help bring in the spirits of the dead to the heavenly realm where they rest. Him being scared of the dark, she had that she could use as a weapon to quote unquote get him to act right, which in that case, a relationship like that would never work. And then you got archetype number 3, which is Elegua / Papa Legba, who is really the only deity who could get the most out of Oya. And see, when you deal with the energy of Papa Legba, you learn a lot of pimp principles with him, because just like how Eshu Laroye is looked at in his older form as an astute businessman, Papa Legba would kind of be looked at as the CEO. So my analogy is going to be talking about how to be in a relationship like that, because shout out to O'Shea Duke Jackson. I looked at one of his live streams, and I think the live stream was about, if you tell a girl I love you, then you're simping. I think that's what it was. It was either that or the one right after that, where it was this guy on there, and he was a young dude, and he had to pretty much go toe to toe with a lot of the older dudes that was in the chat. And I'm not going to beat up on him because, number one, I'm not really in that manosphere type of thing, so I don't really have a dog in that fight. And shout out to Ringo TV Raw, aka Black Male Advice TV, because he already did a whole live stream dismantling a lot of the stuff that he was talking about. Because with him, he was talking about using women for porn, making money from smutting women out, making porn videos and building up money that way. So I kind of want to take that same model, put my own spin on it, and put some righteousness into it. And when y'all hear this, I want y'all to tell me what y'all opinion is in the comment section about what do y'all think of this. Now, shout out to Doc BOA, shout out to Black Male Advice TV, Steve the Dean Williams, all of the dating coaches and game coaches that I've ever listened to back in the day, because they've all had this type of analogy about dealing with women. So I don't want to seem like I'm stepping on their toes or anything like that. So that's why I want to give them that shout out. So this is kind of going to be like the analogy that I did about the house. Now, my opinion is, unless you're trying to be a ruler or a nation builder or a king, you shouldn't even be thinking about polygamy, to be honest with you, because I'm thinking about this in a higher type of perspective. I'm not thinking about this in regards to the lowest level of communication, meaning that you just want 3 or 4 women just to have sex with, because as you're going to see, it goes a lot deeper than that. So first, you got to create the infrastructure, and let's go ahead and assume that everything is already copyrighted, trademarked, you got your LLC or you got your corporation already paid for, and your articles of incorporated, corporate bank account, all of those foundational things is already taken care of. Let's say that you already got your website done, so your infrastructure is pretty much made. So now the next thing that you need to do is to put together your rules and your terms of service when it comes to the company that you got. And for every person, this is going to be different, because translation, when you're trying to build this nation and you're trying to build this kingdom, you got to already be at your stage 3, meaning that you've already pretty much have set in stone rules, expectations, expected projection, goals, all of this stuff that you won't tolerate, stuff that you would let it slide, aka you got to have a write-up system. Or you may be the type of person where if somebody on your team fuck up one time, they out the door, but you have to make sure that that's written in your contracts. So now that you got all of the foundational things out the way, now all you need to do is find the right people to be in the right position so that everything can get going, simply because you know you can't do this by yourself. So your mindset is you want to make sure that you get the best group of people that's going to carry out this mission, and it's going to make this kingdom, make this company great among one of the greatest Fortune 500 companies, so that everybody in your kingdom will be comfortable, content, happy, and peaceful, because it's nothing like a peaceful kingdom. So now while you're out scouting, you remember that there's really 4 different archetypes of employees that you're going to have in your company. You're going to have temp service workers, you're going to have interns, you're going to have your regular employees, and then you're going to have your managers / supervisor. And this process is going to be probably the most tedious process out of everything that you've done up to this point, simply because the wrong employee can fuck this whole organization up, and you got to start all the way over from the bottom. Now let's explain these employee archetypes. So the first employee archetype is the temp service worker. Now the temp service worker, y'all pretty much already contractually agreed that that temp service worker is only going to be in your life and working for your company only for a season. Now when it comes to benefits, they get their benefits through the temp service, so they pretty much have nothing to lose. Now with all the jobs that I've ever worked at, the people who came with the most drama, the people who had the most rambunctiousness about them and just the most I don't give a fuck type of attitude were the temp service workers, simply because number one, a lot of temp services don't even pay you for the work that you do, that if you would have applied for that company directly, you would have got. But if you really got a push that needs to happen, or you really got something in your company that really needs to be done really, really fast, you can hire some temp service workers for little or nothing, and they'll be able to get the job done. Now, you may have to come up behind them just to make sure that it's to your standard, but nonetheless, they'll get the job done. Translation, you got this idea that you want to build this nation, and you got things already set up to do that. You're going to have women that's going to come in, and they may only be in your life just to help you out for a season. They may already got them somebody on the side or something like that, and it might be a situation to where they would be a work for hire, where you would pay them one time to do something for your company, and then once they've done their work, they can go on about their merry way. Because why are you going to give a temp service worker benefits? In a lot of ways, that would actually hurt them, because remember, if you're making the right kind of money, benefits is good, because it won't hurt as bad when they take that money out your check. But if you ain't hardly making nothing and you getting benefits, it's going to be a lot worse when they take all that money out your check and you like, damn, is this eye care and this dental care, is it really worth it? Translation, with great power comes great responsibility. As a stage 3 type of man, you have to really look at your sex and your companionship as a benefit package, and you have to treat your space and treat your organization as such, meaning that as a stage 3 man, as a righteous, enlightened man, you really have to be careful who you give your benefits package to, because that's the company's money that you're spending, and you spend too much of that, your company go bankrupt. Now what? So the second type of employee that's going to be working for your company is going to be the intern. Now, the intern, they just want to help out so they can get some experience and say that they work for your company so they can put it on their resume and go somewhere else. Now, with this archetype of employee, if you see that person busting their ass and working hard, you might hire them on as an employee. Translation, you got a woman that come into your life and she can see your vision, she can see what you're trying to do, and she like, look, you ain't even got to pay me. Intern, I just want to make sure that I can just say that I was a part of this and that I helped this company be as prestigious as I know that it can be. Now, when it comes to the quote-unquote benefits side of the game, this is where a lot of scandals happen. They can make or break your company, meaning you have a lot of these bosses that get in these scandals because they got an intern that's so desperate to be an employee for the company that they would literally do anything, and I mean anything, to get that position. And these bosses end up having sex with these interns and secretaries and all of this stuff, and since they really ain't got nothing to lose, they end up snitching on you. Now you got this whole legal battle going on, and all that's doing is draining money, making your company go bankrupt, giving your company a bad reputation, giving your company a bad name. And once your company gets a bad name, you'll damn near have to start all the way over and make something totally different in order to get yourself back right. So the third archetype of employee is the employee. These are people who pretty much made the cut, so they're all the way on board with what you're doing. Everybody's on the same page, everybody got the same vision, and if you got employees that are working hard and keeping your reputation good, keeping the numbers good, you're on your way to having very valuable company. But remember, even employees don't get benefits straight away. You have what is called a 90-day grace period, where you pretty much got to prove your longevity and loyalty before you even start to get benefits. So when you do get the benefits, they feel like a huge, long awaited for reward. Translation, an employee is a woman who's not only down for what you got going, but she's also willing to do whatever it takes to make this vision not only come true, but to keep it being fruitful and to keep it being lucrative. Now, when you're team building and you're thinking about putting somebody on the team to be a future employee, you know women have that quote-unquote 90-day rule that they do when it comes to if they want to have sex with the guy that they're dating. But for us men, if we're really serious about this nation building, every woman that we have in our life have to in some way be of some type of contribution to what you got going on, to the program that you got going on, and just the overall goal and mission statement of your company. And then last but not least, because I still haven't even talked about the archetypes of women that you can have sex with, because there's really one archetype. And as you can see with all of these examples that I'm doing, the number one thing as a man, you really have to control your sexual urge when it comes to this. None of this can you let be read with your dick. The head between your ears have to be the principal mechanism to really vet these team members and interns and all of this stuff, to make sure your judgment isn't cloudy and you end up letting a snake slip through the crack and mess your whole company up. Telling you, it only takes one or two. So now once you start going up to the managers, the supervisor, these are where the oyas come in at. Because if you're a CEO of a company, you're going to want your managers and supervisors, you got to be able to, in a lot of ways, trust their judgment. Because when it comes to the chain of command, you want to have a healthy hierarchy. Because just like what Alan Roger Curry said, if you got a problem with a McDonald's burger, you don't go to the CEO of McDonald's to complain about the burger. You got to go up the chain of command. And what I love about Oya is this is really where she shines at, because you're going to know when you got an Oya on your hands, because she's going to come on the scene selling herself. And you're going to tell that not only is she genuine, you're going to be able to feel that sense of confidence, that sense of authority, that sense that even though she's a woman, she's one of those women that you really don't have to keep too much of an eye on her. Because Oya, when she's in that position in your life, she's extremely professional. Oya is one of those type of women that she won't be on those super feminine type shit. She has femininity, but when she goes after what she wants, especially if it's a man, in a way, she kind of acts like a dude in a way. She'll be the one to come up to you and be like, look, I see what you got going on here, and I truly feel that this company that you got can go far, and I believe in it. But after you interview me, you're gonna see that I've been the one that you've been looking for all along. And the more you get to know me, you're gonna see how much of an asset to your company that I really am. She gonna hand you that resume that's professionally done, typed real good. She gonna be looking sexy, but she's gonna be dressed up in a real professional business suit, looking like Kerry Washington on Scandal. And the thing about it is, you don't need a whole bunch of Oyas, because all that's gonna do is bring drama around. Just like how you can't have a whole bunch of alpha males who think they're the most alpha in the room, because that's pretty much going to be an argument or a fight waiting to happen. And when it comes to these type positions and the power that it possesses, Oya can get very jealous, and she does not like sharing, at least not in that aspect. So if you meet a Oya and you got your company and you want to hire her on as a manager or a supervisor or someone like that, she's going to be beautiful, and she's definitely going to be someone that you will want to keep around. So before you try to bring some Oyas on the team, you better make sure that everything is in check, everything is in order, all the positions are laid out, and whatever you tell her that you expect of her and whatever you tell her that you're going to do on your end, you got to keep that bargain, because if ain't nobody else going to hold you to it, she's going to hold you to it. And then last but not least, you got your COO. Now, everybody is going to run their company a lot different, but your COO or your Obanani would initially be if you was with a woman while you were in the building stages of your company, and she played a major part in starting everything up, getting everything to the way it was before you started hiring people. In a lot of ways, those women are the ones that love you for you, meaning that if you lost this whole company tomorrow, your COO ain't going nowhere. Both of y'all taking a hit. So the COO would be the most important title when you're talking about your company, because one thing that a lot of guys tend to get misconstrued, and this results in a lot of things messing up, is that before they start handing out benefits packages, they truly don't vet the girl to figure out what her position in your life is going to be. You might have gave her a benefit package and she might just be an intern. So you got to really watch out with that type of stuff, because at the end of the day, talking back on a man and woman type of level, not every woman that you have on your team is going to be able to handle having sex with you and still being on the team. Like I said, this is higher level stage 3 type of thing, because we're not building this team up solely for the lowest level of communication. Remember, if you got a team of women and you're trying to have the lowest level of communication with all of those women, and that's the only position that they're in, that position is already full of so many different people that she's not really going to feel valued in that position. And that's where uncomfortability, insecurity, and drama and conflict starts to set in. Because like I said, you really got to watch and really be able to read the women that you put on your team. Let's talk about Shiva for a minute. When I looked into the mythology of Shiva, for the most part, Shiva was a monk. Not only was Shiva a monk, so he was able to emotionally, mentally, and spiritually control himself, he also was a master at Tantra, meaning that not only was he able to calm Kali down on the battlefield, he was also the only man who could truly satisfy Kali sexually. Why? Because Shiva wasn't out there having a whole lot of sex. And if you think these folks in the Bible that had 20 different wives, if you think that those dudes was continuously having sex with all of those women, y'all delusional, man. There's so many different ways that you can give a woman an orgasm without even penetrating her. But see, that's the whole nother podcast right there. That's a whole nother podcast. And then another thing that I want to touch on too is that you want to always be able to make sure that the morale of your company is on point, meaning that you got some type of reward system in place when your employees do good, whether that's a bonus on their check or whether that's a night out for dinner. I mean, sometimes it's just a little thing that you can do to show people that you care. Shout out to DeBarge for that, because I know in my job, when we do a good job and we see that bonus on our check, or we do a good job and our manager takes us out to eat or gives us a gift card or something like that, it's those little things that just make me want to work even harder and just grind even harder, because I know that I'm being noticed for my hard work, and I know that I'm being rewarded for my hard work. And with a woman that's truly down for you and truly down for your program, it's nothing like you taking her out on the town, y'all both dressed up real nice, and she's on your arm, and that's her reward for grinding and working so hard during the week. So on the weekend, you plan the night out with your girl or with your wives, and y'all just go out and just have a good time. But it's just, everything has to be in harmony, everything has to be on point, and everything just has to be on a divine and righteous type of situation. And that's the only way that a polygamous relationship would even work, is if it's built on righteousness, if the foundation built on righteousness, not sex, not money, not status, none of that, straight up righteous. So that's my podcast. Shout out to everybody who stayed to the end and listened. I know I was all over the place, but me dealing with Oya's energy, Oya's all over the place, so shit. Shout out to Jazz Royale. Shout out to all of the people that comment on my videos and share them. As you all know, if you would like to donate, my donation link will be in the description. Make sure y'all share, and let me know what other Orishas y'all would want me to touch on, because I'm still learning. Like I said, I'm still learning, so always up to try new challenges and do new things. So all right, y'all, BandClap TV.